Breaking news today. Alex Murdaugh's murder convictions have officially been overturned by the South Carolina Supreme Court after allegations and findings related to jury contamination, or you might know it as jury tampering, and improper influence during the trial process. And honestly, this case is now becoming about something much larger than Alex Murdaugh himself. Because today we need to talk about constitutional fairness, jury integrity, courtroom neutrality, tunnel vision, emotional certainty, and why even deeply unpopular defendants are still entitled to an impartial process. And honestly, the principle becomes most important in the hardest cases because constitutional rights are not designed only for easy defendants. They exist for difficult cases and defendants as well. Let's talk about part one for those of you who don't know the case. For anyone unfamiliar with the story, Alex Murdaugh was a powerful South Carolina attorney from a well-known legal family who was convicted in the 2021 murders of his wife Maggie Murdaugh and son Paul Murdaugh at the family's Moselle property. The case became one of the most heavily covered criminal trials in America because it involved wealth, it involved influence, it involved addiction, it involved financial crimes, and it also involved family collapse and shocking allegations of murder. Prosecutors argued that Murdaugh killed his wife and son as his financial crimes and personal life began unraveling publicly. The defense argued there was no physical evidence, no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon recovered, and the state relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and behavioral interpretation. Ultimately, the jury convicted Murdaugh, and he was sentenced to life in prison. But tonight, everything changed legally. What the South Carolina Supreme Court just did. The South Carolina Supreme Court unanimously, which means every single judge agreed, overturned the murder conviction and ordered a new trial. And honestly, this is an extraordinary appellate outcome because appellate courts do not casually overturn murder convictions after a lengthy jury trial. The issue centered around allegations involving court clerk Rebecca Becky Hill and claims that jurors were improperly influenced during the trial. And one of the strongest lines in the opinion reportedly stated, she placed her fingers on the scales of justice, which is clearly a euphemism, but it conveys it so directly because she was tampering with something that should not have been tampered with. Legally, that language is massive. I think we're still going to be waiting to hear what happens to the clerk because clearly what she did was wrong and it was a miscarriage of justice if it is found to be true. Again, I don't know very much about it, just kind of learning, same as you all are, in what the developments are. Because the court is essentially saying the neutrality of the process itself became compromised. And that is not a small thing. That is a massive thing, a massive obstruction, a massive miscarriage of justice. This does not mean innocence. So don't think that he's walking free today. He's actually, my understanding, still incarcerated on financial crimes. I think taking from his clients and things like that. And this distinction is critical. An overturned conviction is not a declaration of innocence, an acquittal, or an exoneration, but he will have a new trial. That is what they granted. They granted a new trial. What it means is the appellate court determined the process itself became constitutionally unreliable. And honestly, this is where many people emotionally struggle. Because humans naturally think, if I believe someone is guilty, procedural problems should not matter. That there's nothing that could be further from the truth. because our procedure is meant to keep things fair, keep things above board. And when someone violates those rules, that is a massive, massive gap that should not exist. And then you wonder, how did that happen? But constitutional protections are specifically to prevent emotional-driven shortcuts in the justice system. We all are entitled to due process rights, and when those rights are violated, we should all be angry. We should all be upset. We should all question, how did this happen? And the person who did it should be held responsible if it can be proven. And honestly, if courts only protected popular or sympathetic defendants, those protections would become meaningless. If you only protect the people that you like and don't protect the people that you don't like, then we don't have a system. We have vigilante justice. I like this person gets full rights. I don't like this person, they don't get full rights. That's not how it works. Section 4, why jury tampering is so serious. The jury is supposed to be neutral, independent, and free from outside influence. If Rebecca Hill was the person who influenced the jury, then yes, clearly they're having the evidence if that's what the court came up with. Court officers are not supposed to shape interpretation, influence credibility, steer deliberations, or emotionally contaminate the process. Because once that happens, the defense argument becomes the presumption of innocence was compromised. My client did not have a fair and equal jury. And honestly, this is not a small procedural issue. It's probably going to send shockwaves because a lot of people are going to be like, oh my goodness, how can I trust a jury? And the thing is, what Rebecca Hill did, also not only did she apparently do things that she wasn't supposed to do with the jury, but here's the thing, there are a lot of people who are going to say, you know what, I don't trust the jury anymore. They could easily be influenced. So then there's a backlash from the court system, which in and of itself is a massive violation because people need to be able to trust the court system. This strikes at the constitutional core of the trial itself, right? Jurors are supposed to be fair and impartial. And honestly, I think many people underestimate how psychologically influential authority figures can become inside courtroom environments, because a lot of people are not used to the courtroom. A lot of people have not been in a courtroom, not tried a case, done all those things, not even been on a jury. So they have no experience in that. And so they go to people who work in the courtroom every single day, right? And ask questions potentially and count on those people to guide them and to follow the rules that they don't know about. Jurors are human beings. Humans are influenced by social pressure, authority, emotional framing, tone, repetition, and perceived insider knowledge. That's precisely why neutrality matters so much. Part 5, the psychology of tunnel vision. This case also highlights something psychologically fascinating. Humans become emotionally certain very quickly. Once people emotionally commit to a narrative, contradictory information can begin feeling threatening, irritating, unbelievable, or irrelevant. Hey, I've already made up my mind. I don't need to hear all that. But you do. And honestly, that happens everywhere. Criminal investigations, juries, politics, social media, families and institutions. Human beings are not emotionless observers. We interpret reality through bias, experience, emotion, fear, assumptions, you know what they say about assumptions, and social influence. And honestly, this does not automatically mean people are evil or corrupt. Sometimes it simply means humans become so convinced they are right that objectivity begins slipping away. That's where tunnel vision develops. Part 6, will Alex Murdaugh walk free? Probably not. And this is important. Alex Murdaugh remains incarcerated because of separate financial convictions and related sentences. So this ruling does not mean he suddenly walks out of prison tomorrow. The state now must decide whether to retry the murder case, how strong the evidence remains, whether a neutral jury can realistically be seated, or maybe they could do a change of venue, change it out of a certain portion of South Carolina. And whether retrying the case is strategically worthwhile. I guess it depends on how much time he has on his financial crimes, if those would keep him in prison for life or how that would work out. And honestly, that may now become one of the biggest legal questions in America, because this case has become so nationally publicized that seating an impartial second jury could become extraordinarily difficult unless they change the venue and they go to jurors. It's going to be really hard to find jurors that don't know anything about the case, but it would be better likely to not have it in his home area so that people that don't know him personally and know other facts or what they've seen on media can, speculate on what's happening. So it may be better to get a pool of jurors from another area, and they can actually sometimes bust them in depending on the budget and things. But I would think with the murder case, there's maybe a likelihood of doing something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not out of the question. Why this case matters beyond Alex Murdaugh. And honestly, this story is now bigger than one defendant because it forces people to confront uncomfortable questions. Can a guilty verdict still become constitutionally unsafe? What happens when neutrality collapses? Can emotionally charged trials remain fair? How do humans resist tunnel vision? And how much outside influence is too much influence? Those questions matter far beyond this one case. Because once public trust in jury neutrality erodes, the legitimacy of the justice system itself becomes vulnerable. In closing, and maybe the biggest takeaway today is this: the justice system is not tested most during easy cases. It is tested during emotional cases, high-profile cases, unpopular defendant cases, and cases where public certainty becomes overwhelming. Because constitutional fairness matters more precisely when emotions are running highest. And honestly, this is why this ruling is sending shockwaves through the legal world today. Thank you for tuning in to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney, and this was a shocker for sure. So I hope that if you got value from this video, feel free to like and subscribe. That's what I do. I break down legal concepts and try to help you understand why they're so important and how everything connects. And feel free to like and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.